Alrighty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things Oldhammer related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. In this video, I'm going to be adding an Exarch to the Swooping Hawk unit that I've done recently. I hope you enjoy. Seeing as how I've already gone through Exarchs and their rules back in the Howling Banshee Exarch video, which I will link here, there's no need really for me to go back over them. But what makes an Exarch special is the war gear that they have. So for a Swooping Hawk Exarch, they will come with the Swooping Hawk wings as well as the grenade pack. This particular Exarch though, does come with something else, and that is the Las Blaster war gear card. This weapon is a tri-barreled laser weapon, and it also comes complete with a combat blade attached to the stock of it so you can use it in close combat. Where it's got 3 barrels, you can shoot it 3 times in the shooting phase and at separate targets, as long as they're within 6 inches of each other. And you roll to hit and wound them as normal. And the power blade, like I said, can be used in close combat with a strength 5 as well as a -3 save modifier, which makes it basically a power sword but doesn't come with parry. But even without parry, it can make for quite a potent close combat weapon. When it comes to painting up this Swooping Hawk Exarch, I've taken quite heavy inspiration from this picture here, back from the second Ed 40k rulebook. So we're going to be using some darker brooding colours than I used on the Swooping Hawks before, as well as mixing in there some yellows to really brighten it up. So let's get yourself your cup of tea ready, get to the painting desk and see how I do it. The first thing I'm going to do for painting this armour is going to be starting off with Fenrisian Grey, just like I did for the Swooping Hawks. I'm going to start by putting this on all the areas of the armour that I want to be this colour. It doesn't matter too much if I get it on some of the armour panels, because I'm going to be painting them black like in the image that I'm taking inspiration from. And this is just a case of going over and doing about 2 or 3 thin coats until you have a nice coverage. Next up is going to be the black, and for that I'm going to use contrast paints Black Legion. And I quite like the contrast paints for certain things, especially like this, because even though they are quite thin, if you practice some decent brush control, they've got some really nice coverage to them. So you don't have to spend ages doing multiple layers to get them to cover. As long as you're careful, and then you don't make too much mess with them. I'm going to be doing this pretty much the way it is in the picture in the rulebook. And it's going to be the helmet, his armour panels, as well as the Swooping Hawk jump pack. The next one I'm going to go to is Wraithbone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to go over pretty much everything else that I'm going to be doing on this in different colours, because I want them to be a little bit brighter, and I'm going to be using some contrast paints again on them. And I want these to be as bright as possible. So this is going to be on areas such as the wings on his jump pack, as well as the barrel of his gun, the feathers that are on his helmet, as well as the beaky part of his rebreather. And there'll be a couple other spots. And it's just a case of going over this with some thin down coats, taking your time, picking out all the areas that you are going to be doing brighter. Before I start base coating all the other colours over the white that I've just done, I'm going to do the brown pouches and belt that he's got. And for that, I'm going to use a base coat of Mournfang Brown. After the Mournfang Brown, I'm going to start using some Uriel Yellow. And I'm going to put that on the inner feathers of his jump pack, as well as this feathered plume on his helmet, and also the 2 knee pads on his armour, and also the parts on his gun that have been done in the picture, so the front of the barrel and the sort of energy coils that are there as well. And you're going to want to do about 2 or 3 thin coats of this to get a good, nice, even coverage. The next colour I'm going to do is Warpstone Glow. Now I'm going to do that on alternate feathers on here, similar to the way I did the previous Swooping Hawks. I'm also going to do this on his armband as well as on the band going around his leg. The next colour I'm going to do is going to be Lead Belcher. I'm going to do that over most of his gun, and there's a couple of pipes that are dotted around on him as well, but there's not much to do with the metallics in this job. After the Lead Belcher, I took Retributor Armour and painted just the surround of this gem here. The colour scheme I'm doing, that's the only bit of gold on this. After that, I'm going to go to Vallejo's Bloody Red, and I'm going to pick out all of the gems on the model, including on his wing pack. Just a case of looking for all the ones you can find and giving them a couple of coats of this, pick them out. And there you go. As you can see, I've also done the eye lenses of the Exarch's helmet in red as well. Almost there. The next colour I'm going to take is Techless Blue, and I'm just going to paint a couple of details that are knocking around here. So we got the little power node on his the power blade on the end of his las blaster, and then there's a couple of little indicator lights that are on here that I'm also going to paint blue. You don't have to do them these colour, you can even leave them unpainted if you want and just the lead belcher or whatever else, but I think it's quite nice just to pick them out a little bit like that. And then the final colour we're going to use for base colours is some Ushakti bone just on the power blade down here on the hilt of his weapon. For the washes, we're going to start with Contrast Paint's Griff Charger Grey, and that is going to go over all of the Fenrisian Grey armour that we've done. And you just want to guide it into the recesses of the detailing, as well as using it to softly stain the actual surface. We are going to go back in and brighten this all up later. One of the things I almost forgot on this model are these little vent hole things on the back of his armour. And what I'm going to use on these ones is Balthazar Gold. And it goes to show how easy it can be to miss parts on a model. So it helps just to really pay attention to it as you're going around and doing each stage, so you don't do little things like that. Because you'll kick yourself if it gets to the very end of the model and you notice that you've done them, or not done them, as the case may be. The next colour I'm going to put the wash over is the yellow. I'm going to do that a couple of different ways. Firstly, for the feathers, I'm going to apply Contrast Paint's Eandon Yellow. I'm just going to paint this down towards the base of them. Try not to have too much on your brush, like I've just done. If you do get a bit too much on it, as long as you're quick, you can just wick it up with the brush and work it round the other areas where you need it. And after that, specifically on the feathers on the jump pack, I'm going to take a mix of 4 parts Contrast Medium to 1 part Contrast Paint Snakebite Leather. And using the thinnest brush you've got, for this one I'm using an Army Painter's Masterclass brush, I'm going to paint this mix directly into these deepest recesses on the feathers on his jump pack. Don't worry if you do go a little bit broader with this than you want to, because we are going to go back in later with yellow and brighten them up. But it's just a case of going along the recesses of each one of these and painting this mix directly into it. And there we go. That helps to define the definition between those wing feathers just a little bit better. The next yellow I put a wash over is going to be the energy coils on his laser weapon. For that, I'm using an older GW paint, which is one of their glazes called Bloodletter. And for that, I'm going to just apply this over the energy coils, try and give it a little bit more of a redder sheen. You could probably do this with maybe an orangey ink or something. Next up is going to be Coelia Green Shade all over any of the green areas we've got. So that's his armband as well as the feathers. And for the feathers, I'm going to be painting that down from the edges of them right down to the bases. Next up is going to be Apothecary White over any areas that we want. Well, white. That's going to be the rebreather part of his helmet, as well as the feathers on his Swooping Hawk jump pack. After that is going to be Agrax Earthshade, which is going to go over any of the brown details we've done, such as the pouches on the back of him, as well as the straps on his legs. And not forgetting the 2 brass vents up on his shoulders. I'm also going to use this Agrax Earthshade on the blade on the bottom of his laser weapon. I'm just going to paint this in and try and direct it as closely in as I can to the recesses of it and not apply it so heavily. I'm then going to take some Carroburg Crimson and paint it over all of the gems, dragging it down towards the base of them, as well as on the eye lenses of his helmet, again dragging it down towards the base of it. And then on the very few gold areas that I've got, I'm going to take some Reikland Flesh Shade and apply it to those. And then finally, the last wash is going to be Nuln Oil, which is going to go all over the lead belcher areas that I've done for the gun, okay, and any pipes. I'm also going to apply this over all of the areas that we've done in Black Legion's contrast paint. The reason I'm doing this is because That contrast paint has quite a matte finish to it, and adding this bit of Nuln Oil over that will help to reduce that and bring back a little bit of the shine to the armour, except to the black panels themselves. And finally, with the Nuln Oil, is to again take the thinnest brush you've got, again my masterclass brush, and I'm going to paint it as carefully as I can directly into any vents that they've got, such as on his rebreather on his helmet, as well as these little vents just down here on the bottom of his las carbine. And here's the Exarch with all his washes finished. At this stage, if you wanted to, you could glue the wings on, do his base, and call it done. If you'd like to, what we're going to do is take it a little bit further and add some highlights to him and really bring up that little step further as what befits an Exarch of the Eldar. So if you would like to, refresh your cuppa, let's get back to the painting desk and apply some highlights and really make this guy pop. First stage in highlighting I'm going to do is reapplying Fenrisian Grey over all of his armour that I've done, but relieving the recesses darker. After that, I take some blue horror. I'm just going to use it to edge highlight the armour, and that's just going to be the edges of some of the armour panels, his fingers, and a couple other little bits. And for the final highlight of the blue armour, I'm going to take a roughly 50-50 mix of white and blue horror, and I'm just going to put that on the very sharpest points of some of the armour panels that I've highlighted. After the blue armour's been done, I'm going to move on to doing the black parts of the armour. And the first colour I'm going to use to highlight here is going to be Dawnstone, and this is just going to be done by picking out all the edges of the black armour panels, as well as his helmet. And then to finish off the black, I'm going to use Administratum Grey, and this is just going to be used to pick out the very upper little parts of any of the highlights that you've done before this. Next up, I'm going to move on to the yellows, and to begin with, for that, I'm going to start by reapplying Euro Yellow. And on areas like the knee pads and the gun barrels, I'm going to try and just leave some of the darker parts where the shading is on the bottom of them, like that, and then very quickly rinse your brush off and drag that line down so it thins it out a bit. Do the same on this one. So from about a third of the way up, drag the brush up with it, and very quickly rinse your brush off and sort of blur that line out between the two. And that works same on the weapons. And you apply a couple of the coats of the yellow over this as well on the top to get a nice finished coat to it. And you apply a few thinned down coats of this to get the effect where you want it. When it comes to the feathers on his plume, what I'm going to do is just sort of flick the tip of the brush along the edges of each feather. Not so much picking out individual strands of detail that's on here, but just leaving the darker stuff visible. And for the feathers on his jump pack, do a similar thing, just thin the paint down a little bit more and leave it from the recesses and drag the bristles up to the edge of the feathers like this. And where you thin the paint down, as you do this over a couple of progressive coats, steadily covering less area of the feathers, you'll build up quite a nice gradient. After the Uriel yellow's been reapplied, I'm going to go up to Flash Gits Yellow, and I'm going to pick out the edges of any of his knee pads, as well as the edge of the muzzle of his rifle. For the feathers on the plume of his helmet, I'm just going to do the same sort of flicking motion, but only really towards the very edges of the feathers. And for the feathers on his jump pack, it's going to be the same, just picking out as carefully as I can the very edges of each feather. I'm also going to use the Flash Gits Yellow on the energy coils on his las weapon. For that one, this is going to be a case of as carefully as I can trying to pick out each line. And then to finish off the highlighting of the yellow, I'm going to take a little bit of Dawn Yellow and just put it again on the very topmost parts of each of the little areas that I've highlighted. So just here on the top of his kneecap. On the feathers, again, just tiniest little dots, but only really around the edges of it. And on these energy coils, it's going to be a case of doing sort of patchy lines just on the very top parts of them, towards the corners. And for the feathers on his jump pack, I'm just going to do a little dot of this just on the very little corners here. Next up is going to be the greens. And for that, I'm going to start by reapplying Warpstone Glow. And it's just a case of putting over nearly the whole thing, except the darker recesses of them. And I also do the same on his armband as well. And this will take a couple of coats because, again, remember, Warpstone Glow has really bad coverage. But just be patient and don't be tempted to put thicker coats on. After the Warpstone Glow, I'm going to move up to Moot Green, and that's going to be used on the very edges of the feathers. And then to finish off the wingtips specifically, I'm going to take Gauss Blaster Green and just put a tiny bit of it just on the very sharpest points of the wingtip. Next colour on the highlighting list is going to be the white. And for that, I'm going to start by applying Corax White over all of the feathers and his mask. You do want to leave the slightly darker recesses left over by the Apothecary White though. And then finally, to finish off the white feathers and the white part on his helmet, I'm going to take some pure white and do a bit of edge highlighting around the edge of the feathers and around the edge of his mask. I'm now going to move on to doing the gems. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Vallejo's Bloody Red, and I'm going to put that just on the top part of the gems and try and leave the little tiny bottom part in the corners of each one, that darker red left over after the wash is put on it. Like that, see? And for the eye lenses, I'm going to do my best to put this just in the most of it, but not down in the very bottom part closest to the rebreather. So we're going to try and leave that a bit darker. Next up, I'm going to go to Vallejo's Orange Fire. And for the gems, I'm going to do a sort of a crescent edge highlight down on the bottom corner where we've left some of that darker colour. And for the eye lenses, I'm just going to try and put a little dot in the top corners of them, as well as a small line along the bottom part there. And to finish off the gems, I'm going to take some pure white and put a small dot just in the very top corner away from the darker bits, and put a little line of it where we put the orange. And then for the eye lenses on his helmet, I'm just going to put a small dot right in the top corner. Now I'm going to move on doing the brown parts that I've done. But I'm going to start again by reapplying Mournfang Brown over most of the areas, except for the darker recesses. I then go in with a bit of Scrag Brown and just pick out a couple of the little edges around the straps and these weapon pouches. And to be honest, even when you're doing models like this up to a slightly higher level, you don't really need to go much further than that on things like the pouches and these straps, because they're so small and you're not really going to notice them that much. So that little bit of highlighting is just going to make them pop just enough, because we're not painting a competition piece here, we're just painting a nice gaming piece. So if you wanted to, you can just leave it there. After that, I'm going to start doing this power blade on the hilt of his las weapon. And I'm going to start by going back in with Ushapti Bone, painting it back over the bulk of this, except for the very darker little bits of it. And then I'm going to go in with some Screaming Skull and just pick out the little edges of the top parts here and pick out where it's supposed to be a little bit sharper so it looks a bit brighter. And we're almost reaching the end here. The next ones we're going to do is do the couple of metallics that I've got. And that is going to be Lead Belcher reapplied over most of the gun. I'm then going to take some Iron Breaker and pick out some of the edges of the las weapon. And on the barrels, what I do is I hold it up to where the light is reflecting where I want the reflection to be. And what I'll do is I will paint the Iron Breaker just where that line is reflecting and showing up. When you do it that way and you're actually painting it, you can't really see it. But when you take it away from the light, it shows up a lot better. And I'll also use the Iron Breaker to pick out the little vents on his helmet as well. And there's a couple of little vents on his jump pack. For the small bit of gold detailing that I've got, I'm going to take some Liberator Gold and just as carefully as I can try and repaint around the surround for the gem. And then these little buckles that he's got on the side of his leg armour, I'm just going to pick out the top parts of them. And then the final colour to highlight is going to be the little blue bits that we've got. And for that, I'm going to use a bit of Baharoth Blue and just put little dots on it. So for the little power node there, little tiny flip around with it. And then these little energy parts on the gun, little dots just to bring them out. And here he is, all finished up. I've put a Swooping Hawk decal on his helmet, as well as done his base in nice Warboss green with the green flock. I've also, when it comes to finishing off the gems, I put a gloss varnish over all of the gems, which just helps them to sparkle just a little bit more. And we've done a little bit further with the highlighting than we normally would for troops, and that's helped this model to really stand out and pop quite a nice little bit. Hope you've enjoyed this instalment of the Eldar Army that I'm doing. I hope to see you again in the next video. If you look in the description below, there'll be a link to my commission painting website where you can go and have a look at some galleries and some price lists if you ever like a commission doing, as well as a few other links to a couple other things down in there as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope to see you soon. And with that, stay smiling and keep the old hammer alive.